All right, well, I have that. It's just a little bit after 3:30. So hello, everyone. This is Teresa Kimker. I am the chair of the Heritage Preservation Commission. And welcome to our meeting for Monday, October 4th of 2021. I'll first do a roll call for the commissioners. And so let me know if you're online with us when I call your name. Commissioner George?
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner, is it, and pardon me for asking this, is it Ostem or Ostem?
It's Ostin, and I'm here.
Thank you. Commissioner Douglas?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello. Commissioner Lupke? I'm here. Commissioner Perotka? Commissioner Nelson?
Here.
And Commissioner McDonald's not going to be with us today, I understand. Let me just try once again for Commissioner Lupke or Commissioner Perotka. Okay. Then we have an agenda for our meeting today, and I have a motion for adoption of the agenda and a second for that motion.
This is Commissioner George. I move we adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you.
Commissioner Nelson, second.
Thank you. Any opposition to that motion to adopt the agenda? Hearing none, then we have an agenda. And are there any conflicts of interest among the commissioners today? Commissioner George?
None.
Thank you. Commissioner Ostin?
None.
Thank you. Commissioner Douglas?
No.
Thank you. Commissioner Nelson?
No.
Okay. Then our next piece of business is the minutes from September 20th meeting. Are there any major edits needed on the submitted motion and the submitted minutes that anybody noticed? Hearing none, if the minutes are true and correct, is there a motion and a second for approval of the minutes?
This is Nelson, so moved.
Thank you.
Commissioner George, second.
Thank you. Any opposition to the motion for approval of the minutes? Hearing none, our minutes are approved. I just want to make sure we didn't have anybody, either Commissioner Perotka or Commissioner Lupke, join us in the last minute or two. No?
This is Commissioner Perotka. I'm here.
Okay, thank you. No conflicts of interest for you today?
No conflicts of interest.
Okay, thank you. So our first piece of business today is the CLG comments on the proposed development at 1619 Dayton Avenue. And we should have a staff presentation on that.
Yes. Sorry, I have a member of the public trying to get in as well, so. Okay, this is CLG consultation and comment for 619 Dayton, otherwise known as Marshall Flats. A portion of the site and surface parking has been subdivided to create a new parcel. The proposed new apartment building will be constructed within the historic boundary of Richards Gordon School, utilizing existing surface parking lot, which was historically the north schoolyard. This new 6-story infill building will consist of 98 units of affordable rental housing. The Richards Gordon School building occupies the lot and currently houses office space. The site is surrounded by a limestone retaining wall that was constructed in 1936 by the Works Progress Administration. The project proposal was forwarded to the State Historic Preservation Office, and 21 structures were reviewed. 20 structures were determined that no intensive survey or evaluation would be warranted. However, the Richard Gordon School was determined to be eligible for listing as a historic resource, potential historic resource. And to quote, the SHPO, which includes the school building, surrounding site landscape, and the WPA perimeter wall, retains a high level of historic integrity of design, materials, setting, location, workmanship, feeling, and association. The City of St. Paul submitted a finding of no adverse effect to the SHPO for use of federal funds. The SHPO disagreed with the no adverse effect finding and had 5 comments. 1, it is clear that the federal undertaking will directly alter the characteristic and result in diminishment of overall integrity of the historic property. 2, the proposed construction will have a potential direct adverse physical effects to the historic property. 3, the new construction must be designed in a manner consistent with the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the treatment of historic properties. The new apartment building has not been designed consistent with those standards. Number 4, the proposed new building presents a significant change to and alters the historic north schoolyard by constructing a structure within what was historically an open space. And 5, the new structure is certainly differentiated. However, it is not compatible with the size, scale, massing, and architectural features of the historic school building. So the effects have been determined by SHPO. This is a little different project than what the HPC has seen in the past. Typically, we're looking at what the effects are, and if we agree with them, and then that goes to SHPO. So we're on the back side of this. SHPO has already made that determination. The question now is how these effects can be mitigated to allow this project to continue. The applicant is suggesting 3 mitigation measures. Number 1 is to rehabilitate the WPA wall. Number 2 is to submit an application to list the school on the National Register of Historic Places. And number 3 is restoring some historic playground land, quote unquote. The commission could consider a redesign of the new structure to a design that is more compliant with the standards for the treatment of historic properties. Redesign could change the determination of effect, but could also result in other effects to the school. The new structure will be a different color, will be set back from the school, so it's not perceivable from the school's front facade, thus preserving the original view. And I included the architect's rendering of this in your packets. The current design leaves the front facade of the schoolyard and school intact. The design as proposed doesn't connect to the school. Rehabilitating the WPA wall would preserve the 1930s view of the front facade. A redesign of the south parking lot area, quote unquote play area, with paving materials which reflect the original yard pattern, which we found in Minnesota State Historical Society photo at the front facade, would assist with preserving the original view of the structure. I also wanted to, those are some of the mitigations. I don't know if commissioners have others. I do want to say I've heard from a couple of you that you had some questions about the project, about what our role is, and the comments. And I want to make it absolutely clear, we have no regulatory authority in this project at all. The school is not designated. It's only been deemed eligible and still have to go through a process to become designated. We are commenting as part of our certified local government review authority. SHPO has asked us to comment, and those comments, we do not have a bearing on this project. The SHPO will. They will take our comments, and they will be the decider that decides what happens mitigation wise with the project. So I know some folks were confused about what is mitigation, what is not. I don't know how to determine effects. This is really more of a situation of how do you feel about this? Do you think that the new building is going to have a completely detrimental effect to the structure so that it won't be able to be seen as an historic school anymore? Or is there some things that can happen to this to assist? I certainly think one of the major things that the developer is doing is going to submit an application to designate the school, something that it's not right now. The school is currently not protected, and designation would protect it. So that is a clear example of a mitigation. So I wanted to make sure we were clear on that. This isn't design review. We're not redesigning something. So we can certainly have a comment back to the SHPO that says we think the design of the school, the design of the new apartment building needs to be reconsidered if you choose. But we don't get into the design of that. So, all right. Are there questions?
Are there questions for staff from the commissioners? Commissioner Kuroka?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, George. So our comments, my question for staff is that would the City of St. Paul HPC have authority and comment on the new construction if the school and the surrounding historic wall are listed? Thank you.
Only if the site was designated before this project was permitted. But my understanding is that lot's been subdivided out, so it'd be its own separate parcel. So no, we wouldn't have it. If it was all one site and not subdivided and it was designated, then we would have the ability to make comment to the planning commission about the subdivision, but that's about it. I mean, we wouldn't have a lot of regulatory authority over the structure itself.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff from the commissioners?
This is Commissioner Nelson. I have a few, if I
Okay.
may.
Yes, Commissioner Nelson?
First of all, thanks, George, for your report, and especially for the stuff that you added later. It really helped clarify where we stand in all this. What is the next step in the process after today?
I would send a letter to the applicant and the SHPO, just alerting them of what your comments are. I believe they're also meeting with a district council to get their comments. And then the SHPO will consider those comments and come up with a mitigation plan.
Okay, that's helpful. I'm glad you mentioned the district council because reading through the official publications from the National Park Service about 106 review, there are lots of mentions in there of consulting parties, and I guess we're a consulting party, right?
Correct.
Is it our job to try to represent the interests of the people of the city and the neighborhood in this process?
No, our job in this is to represent the interests of the potentially historic resource. And what do we feel that there is an effect, and how we would mitigate that effect. We have a public meeting, and the public is welcome to come and comment. And also district council will have an advertised meeting that neighborhood members can come and comment at, and those comments are gathered, given to the SHPO as well.
Oh, that's very helpful. You know, I live quite near this place, and I've been asking around with my neighbors. Nobody's heard anything about it. So it's good that there are going to be public meetings. You wrote in your memo, the commissioner could consider a redesign of the new structure that is more compliant, so on and so forth. SHPO wrote that the thing must be redesigned to comply with the national park standards. I see a difference between could and must. Can you explain?
So SHPO is the authority here. They're the ones that have the regulatory authority in the matter, and they're the ones that will dictate to the applicant what they need to do for mitigation. You as a commissioner, of a consulting party, you can certainly consider that if you want. I think it's important to be aware that a redesign doesn't always pose a better solution. Because if you read, the developer is going to need to have a certain number of floors, a certain number of floor area, things like that. But so let's say you push the building down, it may push the building out, it may push the building to be connected, it may push the building to go in front somehow. I'm not sure. So you can certainly consider it. That could be one of the areas that you want to talk about, but it seems like the SHPO has already, like you said, been very insistent
Firm
about that. So yes.
Okay, that's very helpful. I think I have just one more question for now, which is the applicant suggested nominating the site for the National Register, and I think that's a good idea. But I wonder, as I understand these nominations, and I have looked at a few forms, the context, the site, the integrity of the site is very important. And it strikes me that, you know, once a 6-story black tower goes up right next to the building, the integrity of the site is much altered. So wouldn't that
Impacted.
wouldn't that very negatively affect a nomination?
It could. There is a high degree of integrity with the school itself, though. Even the front yard is basically intact. It's a parking lot right now, but it's still there. You have to think over time there are going to be changes to any historic fabric. It's just the fact, the way the city moves and things happen. So but yeah, you're right. It could have an effect that would cause it not to be designated. So.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Douglas, did you have some questions?
Yes. So the building, the school building, I'm understanding that it's not designated historic yet.
Correct.
But
right.
So I'm wondering about the neighborhood. So is the neighborhood historic preservation or no?
It is not. No. 20 structures in the area were looked at, and the SHPO commented that No intensive survey, further survey would be, evaluation would be warranted for the surrounding properties.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so, yeah, and I guess just so, I guess that's my question, but that's a beautiful building. I've been in it. It is a gorgeous building, and it does seem that, the new structure does take away from it because it's so contemporary. It's just a big rectangle. Although they did try to use some of that color, but I guess I'm kind of agreeing with Schippo. It's unless they add, I know you said we're not designing, but if they added the same facade perhaps that's on the original building would kind of be more in keeping with that building. But I don't know. That's all I needed to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Perouka, did you have another question?
Yes, I did. George, the structure and landscape in question right now takes up an entire square block, is that correct?
I don't believe it takes up an entire square block. I think the eastern end of that block has been subdivided off.
Okay.
Believe.
And so this proposal to list the school to restore and regain what Schippo in its letter called itself what was historically an open space, end quote, but hasn't been for many generations. There's no protection for this building right now. And so listing it would add to that protection. And also there's, and it would be a listing that would be led by the owner of the subdivision that includes the school?
Yes, for listing on the National Register, you have to have owner consent.
Okay. And there would be a partial restoration of the, what was historically an open space, and the garnering of a save and restoration of a WPA retaining wall.
Correct.
And Schippo's main focus or the concern that they listed was the loss of the north schoolyard restoration or possible regain.
The change of the open space.
The change of the open space.
Yeah, because of the construction of the new building.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Perouka. Any other questions for staff? Let me just run through the roll call, just make sure we're not missing anybody. Commissioner George, any questions for staff on this?
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Commissioner Ostin, any questions for staff?
Just one. So do mitigations, do the mitigations have to be specific to the site, or could they be more general to historic mitigation in the city?
I have seen mitigations that are general. Yeah, so it has to help with the historic property, but like, for instance, I've seen mitigations where maybe something's happening in an area and one of the mitigation measures is to survey that area. I'm not suggesting that here, but there are some things that could happen mitigation wise that maybe isn't directly affecting or assisting the school so much, but maybe the area if we knew there was historic resources nearby. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Excuse me. Any further questions, Commissioner Olson?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Douglas. Any further questions?
No, not at this time.
Commissioner Perouka, anything further?
Yes, I have just one more question for staff. So again, there were 21 buildings looked at, and this is the only one that is being looked at to be listed, the only structure and landscape.
Correct. Basically, the structures surrounding the proposed new construction were all initially evaluated, and the SHPO said we only think the school is potentially eligible.
And so this is the opportunity to list something. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Nelson, anything further?
Just one. The applicant doesn't own Richards Gordon School, does it?
I believe he does. He is on the line, so he can answer that question here in a minute for you all. So.
You know, what I was getting to, I think, obviously, is since the owner must consent to a listing, if the applicant's not the owner, does the owner consent? But I guess we'll get that cleared up. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Nelson. I just had a couple of questions. I was confused. When SHPO said that this property was potentially eligible to be designated as a historic site, is that I know we've had that with other buildings we've dealt with, and is that some sort of formal designation, or or finding? Has somebody done that in the past?
So the SHPO has the authority to make that. It's called a determination. They make that determination. It does not mean the school is designated. It still has to go through the process of that, going through the board and being ratified by the keeper of the register. But it is a determination whenever we, for the purposes of environmental review. So.
And I mean, one question is whether was that determination, it wasn't clear to me if that determination was made as a part of the review for this proposal, or if that was some determination that was made earlier in context with the survey of the area or something like that.
It was made in context of this new construction. My understanding is that a part of the environmental review, because federal funds is going to be used for the new construction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and then this is kind of another process question, and that is with respect to, you had said that you commented rightfully that, if there's a redesign of the project, it might have other adverse effects, and so, that's something to take into consideration. But am I right in understanding that at some point the applicant is going to have to get SHPO to agree with its design of the building so that it meets the standards?
Or SHPO is going to have to be comfortable with the mitigation for the site.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's all the prerogative of SHPO in negotiation with this environmental review and this project. So.
Okay. Well, thank you. Okay, one more time, are there any other questions for staff on this project? And if not, then we will hear from the applicant. I assume there's, at least looks like there's a couple people on the line who are here to speak on behalf of the applicant, and the applicant generally has 15 minutes to make their presentation to the commissioners, after which there may be questions from the commissioners.
This is Rich Packin, and should I jump into the conversation here at this time?
Yes, and I guess I should remind you too that everyone will need to state their name and address before speaking. But yes, you can jump in right now.
Wonderful. Okay. My name is Richard Packinen, and my business address is 275 East 4th Street, Suite 720 in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm one of the owners of the Richard Gordon building right now, and I'm one of the developers of the new project. And the name of the project is called Marshall Avenue Flats. On the line here today is also Amy Lucas, our historic consultant, and our architects from Leonard Lawal, Scott, and Erickson. So Mohammed Lawal is on the line, and Ian Simonson. So I'm going to let them talk about the design, and I'm going to ask Amy to speak about the process, the more technical natures of this process. But before we get into kind of specifics, I really want to remind everybody on this call that what we're applying for here is approval to build an affordable housing project. And this location across the street it's probably the highest rent location in St. Paul. There's huge transit options, schools, jobs. It's right in the center of our city. Whole Foods is right across the street. Our proposed rents on this 98 unit project will range from $1,200 to $1,500 per month cheaper than the exact same apartment across the street. And so as we're wrestling with an affordable housing crisis in our city, this is a really good example of an opportunity that exists to help solve part of that problem. We bought this project several years ago, and I bought this building with an eye towards, with looking at that sea of asphalt that is on the north side of this building. And we keep referring to it as open space. If you've stood on it, it's a completely underutilized piece of our city. There's cars parked on it for 5 hours a day, and beyond that, it's empty. And so our hope is to convert that parking lot into some very high quality housing for 98 families. In terms of the neighborhood involvement, we've engaged the local neighborhood group aggressively and extensively through this entire process. And we've gotten absolute support from them, for the project, for rezoning it, for the setbacks. Now for, in seeking, working our way through this historic process as well. And, we were on the land use committee is, meeting a week ago. We'll be on their neighborhood board meeting this Wednesday. And again, I expect to see unanimous support for the approval for this project. So with that, Amy, can you give a little bit of a description? And Mohammed, would you give a description of the project here as well? Maybe hand it off to Amy right now.
Amy, someone's hand is up.
Hi, I'm Amy Lucas with Landscape Research, and I completed the historic Section 106 review of this area. I know that Mohammed wanted to maybe take over and explain the design to everyone, but I can just kind of briefly explain. So the Section 106 review, as George explained, is because federal funds, affordable housing funds, so through HUD and MHFA are being used on this project. Therefore, like a highway, bridge, or LRT line, the Section 106 review process started. So it's been going on for at least 6-7 months at this point, started last fall, where an area of potential effect, an APE, was developed around the project. Usually the first tier of buildings facing the project are evaluated, and they're all looked at for their eligibility to the National Register. As I explained, the only one, as George noted, that came up with potential eligibility was the school. The school, it's at this point, SHPO agreed that is potentially eligible. There are a number of issues with the school. It has been gutted inside, which is usually an issue with National Register eligibility. and the site has been altered somewhat. The school was built in 1911. The WPA wall is actually 1932. Most schools actually at that time in St. Paul, that was a huge WPA project, and most of them actually do have a WPA wall. So the SHPO letter noted that, and we've had a lot of discussion since then with the staff environmental review person, because the wall has been reworked quite a bit, repointed. It's missing one section. It has a concrete cap that was added a few years ago. And the staff reviewer at SHPO did know and was aware that most of those WPA walls do not have any footings and have not been stable through the years. So I think that her letter centered more on looking at mitigation efforts for listing the building or adding some green space somewhere. The way the MOA would work is that there are three parties that would be consulting parties, and that would be the federal agency like MHFA or HUD, the owner developer, in this case Rich Packanen, and then the SHPO and the National Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. We were asked to contact any parties that may be interested. In this case, we contacted the HPC and asked if we could explain the project to them and if they would like to be concurring parties. And we also talked to the Union District Council a few times before the Section 106 when it was just a development project, and now during the Section 106 process. And they have agreed to be concurring parties on the MOA. I'm here for questions, but I know that Mohammed, if we only have 15 minutes, really wanted to explain the project itself.
Thanks, Amy. I guess we're gonna just explain the project blind, or do we show the project as we've designed it, or you all see it? I don't know how this quite works over Zoom. And I'll just state for the record, my name is Mohammed Lawal. My business address is 100 Portland Avenue South, Minneapolis, 55401. And I am the principal architect and CEO of Lawal Scott Erickson Architects, also known as LSE Architects. Ian Simonson is on the call as well, and Ian Simonson is an associate here at LSE Architects and has been leading the project effort on the Marshall Avenue flats at 1619 Dayton. So do we show on our screen what the project is, or I don't know?
This is Commissioner Kimker. If you can certainly do that. I mean, that your renderings and your drawings and your were included in the packet that were sent to the commissioners and available online at the commission website. But you're certainly welcome to, if you can pop them up to the screen, that you're certainly welcome to do that.
I would say that we do have a number of people that are calling in.
Right.
So they can't see the screen, so it's best to always maybe just describe what you're talking about and the design of it. So. And all the drawings are on our website under today's meeting date.
Okay. I will describe what we have is we have designed a new 6-story affordable housing project, 98-unit affordable housing project at the rear of the existing Richard Gordon School on what is currently an asphalt parking lot. And not a green space. We have chosen to do a simple block form building to be very efficient and subservient to the existing Richard Gordon School. We are not trying to compete. We are also not trying to create a building that is identical to the building that was built in 1911. Based on our understanding of the standards and based on our understanding of Secretary of Historic Standards, we can choose to do a building that is either identical or could be fairly different from it. So we've chosen to build what we think is a beautiful, simple black tower, I think, that would recede when one sees the Richard Gordon School from its primary face. The building sits back 50 feet from Richard Gordon School and does not impact or compete with the Richard Gordon School from its primary face at all. In scale, it will be a 6-story building based on a number of units, and it will extend to either side the entire length based on a number of units that we are trying to create. We've taken the window openings and created a very simple module of windows that move very simply along the building face, the north and south faces of the building. And we think it's going to be a fairly elegant building that sits on Marshall Avenue in the site. We do not agree with the finding of SHPO or that this is not compatible and does not meet the standards. So that's my description of the school.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant then from the commissioners? Commissioner Peroka?
Yes, thank you. I know the answer to this, but I would like to hear it for the record. First of all, thank the three of you for coming here today and offering your presentation. Has anyone involved in this project been involved with St. Paul landmarks in the past? And knowing that you have been, could you please state what a few of them are and what your vision is for this particular landmark, the Richard Gordon School building and the WPA wall and the restoration of the part of the North Schoolyard. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, this is Richard Packen, and thank you for that question. I appreciate it. I've been operating in St. Paul for over 20 years, and caring for historic properties is a central part of my business. It's core. We've renovated most recently the Northwestern building down on 4th and Wall. We've owned that for 15 years. The Pioneer Endicott project, that is a project that we've owned. We bought that in the recession. The old historic or the original Ecolab headquarters, now the Osborne 370. I'm one of the partners in that. We have renovated the Lowry Medical Arts building, Rossmore building, the Produce Exchange building all downtown. Delwood Gardens is an assisted living facility that I own up on the east side. That is the oldest nursing home in the state of Michigan. And so the fact that we bought the Richard Gordon building and it's as a historic building, that wasn't lost on us. And owning that building, caring for, doing work with it, making sure it serves an important functional element in our economy and our community is central to what my company is about. And so if you look at all of the buildings that we own, we invest aggressively in them, improving capital investments. Try to do so always in respecting the historic integrity and the process that goes along with caring for a historic building and complying with it for regulation. So that's an extensive answer, but the answer is we touched a lot of historic buildings in the city, and we love it.
Thank you. And for the reasons of full disclosure, I am joining this meeting from the Lowry Medical Arts building right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Peroka. Commissioner Ostin, did you have questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I also want to thank you all for coming. Excited to see this building forward. I just wanted to ask quickly about Mr. Lawal's comments that you disagree with SHPO's finding on this. And I wondered then, are you intending to appeal their finding, or is that more of a statement of your opinion about the design?
I think that's a statement of my opinion about the design. I don't think it should be. I think it's not compatible in terms of, I don't think it's appropriate to design a building in 2021 that matches a building that was built in 1936. And I think that what we've done is a building that is fairly unique. It's authentic to its program and what it houses within it. It has taken a greatly underutilized parcel of land, which is currently a parking lot, and creates great density. And at the height and scale that allows it to be affordable. I think that the materials we've chosen, we've used on other projects, and I think it will be a delightful building and addition area and appropriate of its time.
And Mohammed, could I add to your comment there?
Yes.
For the record, I just described our history in caring for old buildings in the city of St. Paul. I chose to work with Mohammed Lawal and LSE for a reason. I did a lot of research on the architectural firm that we would engage that would do the best possible project here. And that was Mohammed. And so I would encourage this group, if you're not familiar with the work that he has done, I would really encourage you to do a little bit of background work. But he just described it well. We have this historic building, and we have a parking lot on the north side of this site in what is probably the fastest gentrifying area in our city. And this is a great place to do an affordable housing project. But in doing so, we have to go with maximum density. It has to be as big a project as we possibly can because of what's happening in that area and what this project uniquely gives us. It's in what's called a qualified census tract, and that is critical for developing affordable housing. And the fact that a qualified census tract exists across the street from the highest rent project in our city is super unique. And so there were a lot of elements that came into this, but I'm proud to be a partner. I'm proud that LSE is my partner, and I love the work that they're doing on this design.
Thank you. Commissioner Austin, any further questions?
No further questions.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant from the commissioners?
This is Commissioner Douglas.
Yes, Commissioner Douglas.
So, yes. So, I want to say I'm really happy to see affordable housing going up in this neighborhood. I think that is wonderful, and I commend you for that. It's just, as a designer, you're saying you have this historical background, and that's wonderful. But this is a brand new from the ground up construction, and it's and I'm sure it's going to be wonderful. I'm sure you're great designers, but as a designer, what I see is just a rectangle, and I can't see what you've done on the inside. I know we're really not concerned with that, but it does concern me. I see bowling alley hallways, and I just hope that if this goes through, and your problem is SHPO. And that's a big problem. But if it does go through, I hope you're going to do some interesting things, and so it's not just a big black rectangle. It looks beautiful from the outside, but I'm just concerned about the interiors. And I know you probably had to squeeze in as many affordable units as possible, and that's wonderful, because we've got a lot of people who are living out on the streets in Minnesota, and I think this is wonderful that there will be a place for a lot of people to live. But again, as a designer, I just it's just straight hallways with those little doors, and I just wish that the architects in Minnesota would come up with more creative ways to design a facility that houses many people, but make it more interesting and individualistic. So yes, thank you.
Yeah, and I totally respect that point, but corresponding with that point is this is a unique piece of land, and if we start trying to, make design changes like that, the immediate impact to that is a lesser number of units, and that means there'll be fewer families able to access that transit, those jobs, those schools, that growth, and I think that's wrong. And so my direction to the designers and the architects was density, maximum density, and that's where the project stands. And it's and again, I'll stand behind the design of the project. And if you look at the details and the lines and how Mohammed and his team went to great lengths to design a fabulous building here, it's a lot more than a rectangle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, all right. I hate to just keep dwelling on this, but as a designer, I mean, I've done a lot of research, and I'm sure you have too. But we live in Minnesota, and our environment is very important to our facilities. But I know in Canada and different places that have the same environment that we have, they get very creative. There are not a lot of rectangles and squares. I think it can be done, and you can get in a lot of housing, a lot of density. So it's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant from the commissioners?
This is Nelson. I have a few.
Commissioner Nelson, please go ahead.
I think this question, maybe these first few, are directed to Mr. Lawal. And before I begin, I want to say I have seen some of your work. My kids use my grandkids, sorry, use the Weber Park Library, and I think that's a wonderful, wonderful building. So I congratulate you on that one. Now for my questions. Obviously, there's some artistic choices that have been made here, and I want to ask about them. You said that the design, you called the design subservient to the Richards Gordon School. And by the way, everybody, it's not Richard Gordon, it's Richards Gordon with an S. Anyway, I wonder if you could explain how what does look like a big black tower looming behind the school is subservient to it.
As opposed to thanks for the question, as opposed to an ivy tower. And thank you for the information on the Weber Park Library. And I think 17 years ago, when I did propose the addition to the Sumner Library, which is in Minneapolis, which was a 1915 Carnegie Library, the State Historic Preservation Society did not agree with what I thought and what we thought was the appropriate form in addition to that English Tudor building. 17 years later, we've been rehired to redo it because it's been so well received. It received a historic award for its design, and it was very contemporary in its thinking then, and it continues to be contemporary in its thinking today. So I think, there are a lot of ways that one get buildings and one can perceive them. We've spent a lot of time in the recent years studying materiality, form, shape, and scale. And what may appear to be a simple black tower to some is to others, like the Weber Park Library when we were working on it, an elegantly simple building that is of its context and place and time. And, I think the historic standards are clear as I read them and as I've understood them, is that one may choose to try to match the building as it was, or one may choose to be not match the building in its shape, size, and or form. And I think that having a darker building, as we have, I'll call it a charcoal building, allows it to reseed when one sees the school from the south face, which is the front of the Richards Gordon School.
There you go.
Which is the front. So it allows the building to recede, as opposed to, we looked at it at one point as a ivy tower or cream colored building that matches the Richard Gordon School, if you will. And one, we thought that given the size and scale, it would pull the housing project forward to the south, that the Richards Gordon School matted itself into the background, into the housing project, and that there wasn't enough differentiation between the two buildings. And we did not think that that was an appropriate response, nor do we think it's an appropriate response in this instance. And so we chose, through a series of studies, to go with the charcoal building. We did carry some datum lines from the Richards Gordon School through the Marshall Avenue flats, so that some of the datum lines and the base of the building do carry forward the sort of light limestone color of the Richard Gordon School, on which the charcoal tower sits above. So.
Yeah, I get it, I think. I completely agree that trying to match can be a design trap. And yeah, artistic choices have to be made. I understand that. Someone, maybe it was you, wrote in the executive summary, it's our goal to respect the unique qualities of the site. I wonder, what do you mean, the unique qualities of the site?
Before you answer that question, this is Chair Kim Kerr again. I just want to remind everybody on the call that if you're not speaking, you need to please mute yourself from the call. I can hear the ice cream man going by someone's house there. So if you would please take a moment to mute yourself while you're not speaking, so that we get a clear conversation here. Thank you.
Sorry, the ice cream van is outside my house right now.
Oh, okay.
But it's going away.
Okay.
I think that, I believe this is a classic revival building. Is that correct, Ian?
Yes, Mohammed.
Thank you. So I forget which commissioner asked that question.
Nelson.
But I'm sorry?
Nelson.
Commissioner Nelson, thank you. So on this classic revival building and or site, one of the things about classic revival architecture, as I understand, is its simplicity in form and shape. The original Richards Gordon School was built in 1911, and I believe there was a subsequent addition. It's a three-part structure with a fairly simple and authentic representation of the program that's on the inside. And so what we tried to do, at least on this, I don't know if there's anything more unique about this site than any other school site in St. Paul. But what we tried to do is utilize what we felt is the more underutilized portion of the site, and not impact the primary front of the school. So I'm not sure if there's anything more unique about the site, Commissioner, than any other school site that I would see in St. Paul. But
okay. I think my next question or two would be for Mr. Pakkanen. Okay, I'm ready.
Yep.
Okay. One of the criticisms that's often directed at historic preservation is that, and there's some merit to it, is that we care more about buildings than we do about people. So I wonder if you are open to some what I think are more imaginative ideas about mitigation, if it comes to mitigation. I won't hold you in suspense. I'll give you some of these ideas, and perhaps you'd be willing to react to them. So I've lived in the neighborhood for 49 years. If you ask anybody in the neighborhood, where's the Richards Gordon School? People just look at you. They have no idea. Then if you say, oh, if you tell them it's the building with family tree in it. Oh yeah, then I know. So the story of Richards Gordon School is, I'm willing to say, utterly unknown, even to those of us who live nearby. So what I want to suggest is that as a mitigation measure, you all commission an illustrated history of the Richards Gordon School, both the building and the human story of the school itself. There are tons of records out there. There are tons of photos out there. This could be done, and this would be a mitigation, I think, that would bring the story of the building, which is, after all, much more a human story than a brick story, to where the public could find it. Is this something you would think about?
In fact, that is something we have thought about, and I'm going to speak to this specific project. But if you look at our other projects, one of the things we've done, like with our Pioneer Endicott building, we actually commissioned a book to be printed, about the history, the social and economic history of the Pioneer Endicott building, and we donated that book to the museum, the Minnesota Museum of American Arts, now the M. And they sell that book, and the proceeds of that sale go to help fund their operation. But come back to the building here. And one of the ideas, in addition to listing attempting to list the property on the historic register, I know that that's never a process with certainty, is to conduct community education about the history of this building. And that was something that I think Sarah Beamers at the SHPO recommended, we incorporate in as a mitigation effect. So in fact, the answer is yes, and is something that we would entertain and plan on doing.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that. So would you also be willing, and this would be a sort of, well, one might think of it as a natural offshoot of doing that book or publication, of putting in one of the buildings an exhibit with photographs and telling the story, so that maybe both the tenants of your office building and the renters of the building next door could be reminded of the history of the place.
Yeah, I think that absolutely, because and just like writing a book, if you conduct community meetings, well, those community meetings will only last as long as the community meetings last. So whether it's an exhibit or some kind of display, or a social media component, all of these things are all potentials. But the idea around the education and the mitigating effect to this, I mean, this is that we create some kind of community education piece that is lasting. And I think that's, I wouldn't know I wouldn't want to commit to an exhibit, because we'd want to think through what are all the possibilities, and we're brainstorming right now. But the answer is definitely yes. I mean, we would seek to do something that has a lasting effect on the community, understanding of what this building is and the purpose it served in that community.
Well, thank you for that. Then I have one more. This is about the WPA wall. I go by the little sign, incised sign that says WPA almost every day. But if you ask anybody younger than, say, I don't know, 40, what's the WPA? They're just going to look at you. It was 1,000 years ago. But the WPA's contribution to Minnesota, to St. Paul, was long lasting. So I wonder if as part of what we've been talking about, or maybe a marker, a plate on the wall that commemorates the work of the WPA in St. Paul is another mitigation that you would consider.
And again, I would answer that in the same way I'd answered the previous questions, is that absolutely yes. I mean, it's all the story of the site. And you know, what is the WPA wall? Well, that WPA wall was put in place many years after the building was built. And so, you know, imagine a year and a half from now, a brand new building is sitting there with a wall that resembles the WPA wall. And I could totally imagine a plaque there that says this wall is a replacement of the WPA wall that was installed previously, and some history of it. I think all of that is you know, is part of being respectful of building on a historic site and trying to encourage community awareness around what it is we're doing. And at every project we've done, we've always sought to, you know, to do exactly what you're describing, you know, whether it's on our social media, whether it's the way in which we're renovating the buildings, the books that we publish, the names that were chosen for the buildings, et cetera, that all has bearing on that. And so, like, if I can, I want to come back to that WPA wall for just a second. So next time you walk by that wall, take a closer look at it. And we're all talking about it being a WPA historic wall. In fact, if you really look at it, the top of the wall has a 1980s cap on it. And I mean, it's a 1980s wall. And if you go to the east side of the site, what was the WPA wall is now simply ruins. It's gone. I mean, there is no wall on the east side of that site. And the WPA wall, it's that wall that you're looking at sits on a sand foundation. We did test pits to dig down and get underneath the wall to see what it was. If the second we try to put a building on that site, that wall is going to crumble because there's nothing holding it up. And that's, you know, and that's what we're dealing with. And that's why that wall, as pretty as it is, and it's not now 1980s form, it's important that it goes away so we can build 98 units of affordable housing. And I think too, the affordable housing and what we're building there and how it was designed, as Mohammed so eloquently described, I think that's part of the story too. And, you know, part of history is also what's happening today and why we as a community think it's important to welcome all families into our communities. And this is an example of how that gets done.
Okay, I have just one more. Thank you for that, by the way. So when we're talking about the wall crumbling, do you just mean on the north side?
Yes, just on the north side. We're not going to be, when we talk about the wall, it's the wall on the north side. You know, the wall on the south side, actually the top, I think 30 feet on will, but then, you know, the majority of the wall on the west side and all of the wall on the south side will stay as it is. And, you know, will be cared for in the normal course of the way we manage our buildings.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. That's all I have.
Well, and thank you very much for those questions, because I mean, that I think is the spirit of, you articulated very well, kind of the spirit of which, how we're anticipating pursuing the mitigating effects of what we're talking about building. You know, we are talking about building a large building on what was the backyard of this school. That's that. And I think by mitigating it through education and documentation, and description, I think it will be a key aspect of our mitigating effects. Thank you for your comments. They were great.
Thank you. Commissioner Proka, do you have further questions for the applicant?
Yes, I do. I just have an addition, since we were talking about the passage of time and the different historic details and structures that were built. The elementary school was not frozen in time the year it was built. The wall was not frozen in time the year it was built. They exist today. And part of the important story that will be regained with the repositioning of this historic site, which takes up the better part of a city block, is that it was home for 26 years of the Quatrefoil Library. And that is part of its history that would also be regained and should be mentioned here for the record, and also captured in a, it was mentioned in the listening session last month, that there's interest in an LGBTQ plus historic context study, and the Quatrefoil Library would be part of that story, and called the Richards Gordon office building home for 26 years. Thank you.
Well, and to that point, I personally don't know the history of these buildings anywhere near as well as you and this group clearly does. I'm wondering if this group wants to help us create the story so that way we can, help explain to the community what this is all about and how this building was used. I mean, is that something this group would want to engage with us on?
Who can speak for the group?
I certainly think, this is Commissioner Perotka, that when it comes time for comments, we might be able to capture the spirit of that feeling in the comments we have when we forward our comments to SHPO. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant from the commissioners? I do have just one question, and that is, and maybe you touched on this before, and I might have missed it, but to me and maybe intentionally so, but the dark black color of the building is very much in contrast, and sort of, to me, it feels like it intrudes on the building, on the school, and I'm wondering if there was ever any consideration to, having, the similar structure, but a lighter color glass exterior on it that would sort of reflect the school more than what, to me, just, it seems like it kind of blooms over it. Was any thought given to that, or?
Yeah, Mohammed, I think you should probably speak to that, but I want to really restate. A lot of consideration has been given to the color and the presentation of that building, and I really want to reference Mohammed and the work that his firm has done, and the thought that his organization has given to that exact question. We're not trying to match the existing building. We're trying to contrast it, and do so in a very respectful, very well designed manner. And Mohammed, would you speak to that point?
No, sure. Commissioner, we have done a considerable number of studies, and we'd be happy to share those where we have in some ways used a lighter color material on the building, and different combinations. And I think it's, and I think the one commissioner made a comment about how certain things may come down to an artistic choice and a nuance that even I may not be able to render as we illustrate. And I think that, and there have been a lot of conversations about being here in Minnesota and what is, and I also know 6 months out of the year, and it's winter. And I have a fear when you do affordable housing projects that they look elegant, that the families that live in them are seen. They feel that they're in a respectful place and a place that is elegant and it feels appropriate. And how do we design that and do both? And we felt, given everything that we've been working on and what we've been doing, that a charcoal, I'm going to use the term charcoal, a charcoal building, as we've shown, that contrasts the Richards Gordon building. Also, we just felt it was better than the others, and it's just I think it's an artistic piece that we just spent a lot of time looking at on the site, and we're open to re-looking at some of the things that we've done before, but they're difficult buildings to render, and they take a lot of time and nuance to get them right. And over the last 30 years, I've managed to get a lot of buildings right, I think. More right than wrong. And so.
But I want to emphasize what Muhammad just said. We have 98 families that will call this building home. And that the words that he just used to describe how he's approaching the design of this building with respect for those families and pride, a prideful place to say that's where I is, I mean, that's core to that firm's strengths. And I just, as we talk about contrast to this historic building and, the historic site, I don't want to take away from that point that he just made, that this building needs to be a site that is prideful, that's unique, that is not diminutive to the buildings across the street in any way. And that's, we're trying to build a very, very high quality building here that is that serves a very important role in our community. And I don't want to just hear that. Please hear that point that he just made. It's critical.
Okay, I guess, I understand the point you're making and I appreciate it and I think it's great and I think it's important. I guess I'm just not, it's not clear to me why the dark charcoal color is essential to that. But I mean, I understand that's the way you see it. So
I think that's fair. And I'll go back to, because I'm not an educator and things, and we're dialoguing on things. When I was working on the Minneapolis downtown K-12 in 1994, we had a lots of discussions, and there was something that came out in our discussion that was called the Beijing of America. And that's what this committee is doing. But there's this thing when people are selling homes, everyone wants to pick them beige, so they don't elicit a response. I think one of the commissioners talked about the Weber Park Library. We had lots of community meetings and people wanted this building to be a limestone stone from Chaska. And I chose a material that no one thought of. It was a Cold Springs granite and did 5 different finishes. It was just something that was a little different on this 8,000 square foot library. And so I guess I can't elicit what we're trying to do, but what I can tell you is the story of the people that I believe are going to be renting here and what we're trying to do. And I think it's going to be a beautiful building. But it's a subjective artistic piece, and it's based on a lot of experience and things I've done. And but
thank you. I
that.
appreciate that. Commissioner Douglas, did you have further questions?
Yes, just a couple more things. I mean, I appreciate the artistic quality and the elegance that Mohammed is saying. I think that it is a beautiful building. But then I'm wondering if, you know, if we're concerned about the people who are going to live there. It is beautiful and elegant, but I guess just right now from the renderings, I don't see where it's geared towards families. It looks very sterile and elegant, and I don't see places for children playing, and you know, it's a very sophisticated building, and to me it doesn't say families. It doesn't say family oriented. And then the neighborhood too, I know that neighborhood, and it's an old neighborhood, and I know it's being gentrified, but you said it's across from Whole Foods, and I believe I don't remember the colors in the Whole Foods buildings, but isn't it more brick? And I think in the neighborhood, you know, like it's old St. Paul neighborhood, and it's the influence is a lot of brick, like dark browns and red bricks and that type of thing, and it kind of gives and trees, and it gives that warm old you know feeling of St. Paul, and I don't see that in this building. So I kind of think I agreeing with Commissioner Terry that you know, it's that color is very interesting, and you know, like you said, but I think it will stand out too, you know, as an individual building rather than kind of matching in or working in with the surroundings. So it's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Would you mind if I responded to that? Would that be okay? This is Rich backing in here.
No.
As part of receiving neighborhood support for this project, the neighborhood was clear that they wanted to include 5 3-bedroom units priced at 30% of area median income in the building. Now that may not seem significant, but it is, particularly at those rental rates. And so, you know, we'll have 5 3-bedroom units. Of the remaining, what is that? It's 93 units. Half of those will be 2-bedroom units, and the other half are 1-bedrooms. And so, I mean, the building is designed predominantly for families, and so it may not appear that way, but the design of it, you know, the number of bedroom counts, the facilities, that's what we're building.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant at this point? Let me just run through the roll one more time, just to make sure we haven't missed anybody. Commissioner George, any questions?
I just would like to make one quick comment that I do like the charcoal look of the building, because when I focus in on the school, that sort of goes away, and I like that contrast. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ostin, anything further?
Are we going to make further comments on this, or is this the?
Just questions for the applicant at this point, yeah.
Well, no questions.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Douglas, any further questions for the applicant?
No, not right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Peruk, any further questions for the applicant?
No further questions. Thank you.
And Commissioner Nelson, anything further?
Nothing more.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Packett, Ms. Lucas, and Mr. Lawal. I think that was very helpful. And George, was there any written testimony received on this application?
We did not receive any written testimony.
Okay. And are there any members of the public in the audience on this call that would like to testify or comment on this application? And if so, please state your name and address before speaking. And each person will have up to 5 minutes to speak to this. So with that, are there any members of the public on this call that would like to speak to this application?
Hello?
Hello, yes.
Hi, my name is Cliff Swanigan. I live at 1618 Dayton. I'd just like to comment on the family units, what you say is the attractability of everything there. What we're doing, obviously, we tore down a playground to build a parking lot. Now we're going to build a family units that I'm not sure if they will attract what you're thinking of getting the affordable housing there. I grew up in public housing, so I sort of have a little experience of that. But as a thinking that we're going to attract, I think what we're going to attract is basically people who aren't able to afford the really high rent to go into these units. I understand what you say, where there's a few units that are 3-bedroom, which is family, but a 2-bedroom unit is one adult and 2 children, or 2 adults and 1 child. And then there's not, it's just, anyway, I just thought I'd put that out there. And so the attractability is fine. I think it's dumb, but the buildings, the size is kind of squeezed into a small area, but I understand that that's what you're trying to do, is bring somebody here to live. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swanigan. Any other members of the public on the line who would like to comment on this application? Again, I just want to make sure we're not missing anybody. Are there any other members of the public on the line who'd like to comment on this application? Okay, hearing none, then I will close the public hearing on this at this point. And I will ask the commissioners if we have a motion and a second for the application.
This is Commissioner Nelson. I have a motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Nelson. You want to make that motion?
Here goes. I suggest that the St. Paul, I move that the St. Paul HPC suggest as mitigations of the adverse effect to the Richards Gordon School, if necessary, the following. 1, that the applicant apply for listing of the building on the National Register of Historic Places. 2, that the applicant commission the creation of a publication, illustrated publication, documenting and telling the story both of the school as a building and of the school as an educational institution. 3, that the applicant create and exhibit, whether in physical or virtual form, complementing the publication that would be available to the tenants of both buildings to see and learn about the history of the place. 4th, that the applicant place in the vicinity, shall we say, of the WPA wall, a plaque, a plate, a historical marker commemorating the work of the WPA in St. Paul. That's my motion.
Thank you. Is there a second for that motion? Any second for that motion? Commissioner Peroka.
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, discussion on that motion. Commissioner Peroka.
Thank you. I support the motion, and for mitigation, I think the most of the points that Commissioner Nelson detailed are covered by the proposed mitigation that SHPO will be reviewing. When it comes to SHPO's letter of determination, I think it does reduce the entire site to the historic North Schoolyard, which the letter called itself what was historically an open space, end quote, but has been a parking lot for many generations. I think that this narrow determination doesn't do the whole site justice, and that, in fact, when you look at the issues, the points of mitigation that the developer has proposed, leading the listing of the building as the property owner to be listed. The restoration of the WPA wall, which is a style and historic in and of itself, although it's from a different time and place of the original school. But my comments are in support of the resolution and the points of mitigation, the restoration, partial restoration of the North Schoolyard open space as detailed. And so, yeah, I support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Peroka. Commissioner Douglas, did you have comments on the thoughts on the motion?
No, but I think I'll support the motion.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ostin, did you have thoughts or comments on the pending motion?
Yeah. So just in general on the conversation so far, I do think the design is attractive. I want to commend the job of design that you've done. I'm not concerned about the charcoal. I think that'll be fine. I like the density. I honestly wish it could be taller and more dense, and I'm very sympathetic to the situation here. Going from the findings in SHPO, I mean, our opinion is one thing, but and I don't know that I would necessarily agree with SHPO's findings, but just looking at SHPO's findings, I'm not convinced that the mitigations proposed actually do meet those findings, or would be sufficient mitigations for them. I'm going to support this motion anyway, but I guess I'm just saying I wish you luck with SHPO going forward on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Ostin. Any other thoughts or comments, discussion on the pending motion?
Yeah, this is Nelson. I just want to explain, Ethan. The reason I put in the words "if necessary" in the motion is, I think, precisely aimed at what you said. SHPO may impose requirements that are entirely out of our control, which would change everything. So these mitigations obviously are not the design change that SHPO seems to require. That's out of our hands. So that's why I phrased it this way.
I agree.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's a tough spot.
Any other discussion on this motion?
Sorry, commissioners, this is George Gause. I just wanted to break in here for a moment. I do want to say, Commissioner Austin, I appreciate that comment. I will say, SHPO's determination was made without any consulting party outreach. So, and the process is that they usually get consulting party comments before they're making their determination. So this whole project's been a little strange that it's really backwards right now. So I'm just wondering if the comments of the HPC and then the comments, I believe it's Union Park, that the applicants are going to for comments. I just wonder if when those comments get back to SHPO, they may back down a little bit with the redesign aspect of this that they had said. So seeing that we're not as firm with that, I don't know that Union Park is going to be as firm with that. It sounds like the immediate neighborhood is in complete support. So I did want to just share that. So
Thank you, George. Any other further discussion on the pending motion? Commissioner Proka, you still have your hand up. Do you have further comments?
I do. And I was just gonna, thinking about what George, thinking about something and then George said it. As the City of St. Paul HPC, I think we could have a very strong voice in this. We can continue to challenge the design community to meet the needs of a changing city, especially during a housing crisis. But we could be stronger too with this resolution for our input, because this is going up in our city and we are closer to our city than SHPO is. And so we might have an opportunity to inform SHPO that design concerns aside, even though apparently they're outside our scope, and they won't be inside our scope in the future, even if the building's listed. But for the reasons of mitigation, the listing of the site, the landscape, the significance of the wall, the social history of the building itself, the significant builder and architect who designed the building, who himself was the son of a significant local builder and architect, that we could have a strong voice with SHPO regarding this project. If we narrow our scope and see that although there would be a loss of the return of the open space, and there would be an obstructed view from one side, the trade-off would be the listing, would be smart density housing where none exists currently, so you don't have to demolish anything else. And apparently with over 20 other buildings in the neighborhood not having the opportunity to be protected or listed, this is an opportunity to have a strong voice and partner with this project as and when you can get a chance to have underground parking in Minnesota replace above ground parking, take it. I mean, that's a good trade. That's a good trade. So the utility aspects of this building, not considering the design aspects, are good also. So this might be an opportunity, or this is an opportunity for the HPC of St. Paul to have a strong voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Proka. Any other thoughts or comments on this from the commissioners? Let me just run through the roll one more time, just make sure we're not missing anybody. Commissioner George, any further discussion or comments on the pending motion?
No questions or further comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Austin, anything further?
No comments.
Commissioner Douglas, anything further? Commissioner Douglas?
Oh, no further
Anything?
comments.
No? Okay,
Do you-
thank you. I do hear you now. Yes, thank you. Commissioner Peroutka, anything further?
Nothing further, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Nelson, anything further?
Nothing more.
Thank you. Then I will call for a vote on the motion. Commissioner George, how do you vote on that motion? In support or nay?
I vote yes. I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Austin?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Douglas?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Peroutka?
Yes.
And Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Thank you. And then the motion is passed. So thank you all for participating in this, for the applicant, for the commissioners. That was a good discussion, and I'm sure we'll be hearing about this project again. So thank you all.
Yeah, can I also say thank you all for the comprehensive discussion there. That was, I really appreciate you all spending so much time with us today to walk through these details. Thank you all.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you.
So then we have one more item of business, and that is the fiscal year end report for the report to the SHPO. George?
Yes, this is just a very technical item. We do it every year. It's nothing too terribly fancy. It is prescribed by the Minnesota Certified Local Governments Handbook. And you'll see out to the side, there's these little numbers, and that is referring to the citations in that handbook. So, it's the basics of the HPC and some of our numbers, which due to COVID-19, everything's down, except CLG reviews, which are very much up. So not sure if anybody has comments or wants to know more about it, but there it is. So,
George, the only comment I would have, there's two things. One is that it has my old email address on there on the bio.
Okay.
So I'll send you my current email address.
Okay.
Once we get off here, and then I notice I think it's still listing Commissioner George as the vice chair, and I think that needs to be updated.
Yes, he would have been vice chair for a portion of this. This is October to September. So, yeah, I wish it was an actual year instead of this fiscal year. But, yeah.
Okay. Okay, I understand. Well, those are just my very minor comments on that.
Great.
Any other comments for George on the report? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
This is Commissioner George, so moved.
Thank you.
Commissioner Douglas,
Austin,
I second. Oh.
Okay, we're seconded. Okay, any opposition to that motion? Hearing none, we are in adjournment. So thank you, everybody.